Three, two, one. Good afternoon, good evening, and other times. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Pocket Pushers podcast here on YouTube. No longer confined to the constraints of whatever radio station we were doing this podcast on. Ladies and gentlemen, today is September 7th, year of our Lord 2023, and it's the dawn of a new podcast, dawn of a new season, and God, I'm happy to be here, but I am not alone, ladies and gentlemen. It's like that one, that one old raggedy man and homeless man in the Legend of Zelda who said it's not safe to go alone. And ladies and gentlemen, I have found a reliable sidekick, my good friend Harry Gollin, a friend of the show and now a partner of the show. So Harry, good to see you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, I mean, you can say that, but you're supposed to be here for the whole year, man.
That's true. I'm supposed to be the co-host here. We did do a radio show together called Bubby Brister's Brunch Buddies.
Never forget.
On the same radio station. But no longer. Now it's the Pocket Pushers podcast that I'm joining.
Yes, absolutely. And so this will be a fresh upload, folks, onto YouTube. I'll have to upload all season 1 of this podcast at some point in the near future. But welcome to the show. Here we talk about sports. So we're going to be talking about baseball today, and now that the football season is getting underway here in about 3 hours or so, at least at the time of this recording, we will be talking about football come next week. We do aim to have this show up at, Thursdays, roughly, but no promises. So, Harry, I think it's time to talk about the fucking sports.
Well, yeah, Andrew, and unfortunately for you, the way we wrote this up was that you were going to review the Rangers-Astros series before I would get into my Mariners, which means you're going to have to relive some trauma here.
Listen, man. That's not nice, okay? That's not nice. Okay, so
you know what wasn't nice as well?
This fucking
the Rangers
series.
Pitching
The series was
entire
terrible.
Series.
So this is
wow.
This is gonna be interesting. So the Rangers are my favorite team, so I'm gonna be talking about them, and they played quite possibly, Harry, the worst regular season series of their entire history. This is pretty bad. The Rangers got swept by the Astros in the middle of a pennant race. The Astros used this to catapult in the first place of the AL West. And I'm still recovering, okay? I'm still recovering from what was genuinely one of the biggest embarrassments as a Rangers fan I've ever had to witness. This isn't up there with the 2011 World Series, but it's not that far off because this was bad. This was fucking bad. So let's go ahead and start. Let's start recapping the game. Game 1 was rough. Because it started so well. We were at a 5-5 tie going into the 7th inning where everything just fell apart at the end. It was a wasted 2-homer game from Corey Seager. That was just brutal. Things fall apart in the 7th. A 5-5 game a 5-5 game becomes a 6-13 game by the end of, about an hour later after that point. And it was brutal, just brutal. Going into Game 2 was even worse, Harry. I don't know how else to describe this, but Nathan Eovaldi, who has been one of the best pitchers in baseball throughout the course of the year, somehow managed to come back off the IL after getting knocked out in, I want to say, late July or mid-July.
They were saying that it could have been season-ending when it first broke.
Yeah, people thought it was going to be season-ending, but turns out it was just a forearm strain, which, as we found out for Rangers pitchers this year, is usually code for he needs Tommy John. But Eovaldi did come back. He came back, and and it wasn't pretty. It wasn't pretty. He went through one in the third, gave up 3 runs. Didn't look great. He looked rusty. Bruce Bochy came in after the series and after the game and said he looks like a guy who was really rusty. And yeah, he probably needed a couple rehab starts, but this Rangers pitching staff is fucking desperate. I gotta say, they are desperate. So they threw Eovaldi out there just to hope for something, and he was not good. Dane Dunning comes in and gives up 9 runs before finally being lifted after like 4 1/3. And after that, it just kept spiraling. The final score in this one was 1-14, still awful. And then finally, Game 3 yesterday, which was supposed to be the Max Scherzer, Justin Verlander revenge game that everyone was super excited for, was a total stinker. Total complete stinker. Wasn't competitive at all outside of the first inning where it was already 2-0 and Marcus Semien hit a leadoff home run, but that's it. That was it. After that, it just kept spiraling out of control. We didn't get a scoreless appearance, by the way. I was going to talk about this later, but I'm going to let you know now, Harry, just to let you know how bad this series was. By the way, Adolis Garcia, probably the second or third best hitter for this Rangers team throughout the course of the year.
But who's been hitting below the Mendoza line since the All-Star break.
This is true. It's been rough. It's been rough for Adolis. He's one of my favorite players. He comes back. In this game, and he tries to rob a Michael Brantley home run in the second or third inning. Lands funny on his knee. We still don't know what happened to him. He's obviously not up to today because they have an off day today on Thursday. But we don't know his status going into the Oakland series here in about 24 hours. So it could be ugly. This could be like a torn ACL, or it could just be he sprained his knee. We don't know. It could be anything. And it comes at a time where you cannot have this type of setback, especially on the offense, where the offense has been dead for the past 3 weeks especially. But, I mean, they lose Adolis Garcia, and it was never particularly close. And they lose Game 3 by a score of 12-3. So let's just count this up.
Was the closest game in the series the opener, which was lost by 8 runs?
Yes.
So I think if I understand correctly, it goes 8-13-9. Those were the margins of victory.
Yes.
Andrew, I have a question, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where do you go from here?
That's a good question, Harry. I'd like to give you some stats. So
that's code for I have no idea.
So I want you to listen to this, all right? On this disaster series. So this knocked the Rangers into being, 2 or 3 games back in the division from the Astros.
I think I want to say, because the Mariners are a game behind the Astros in the division. Yeah. And the Rangers are either a game or 2 games back. So they're 2 or 3 games out of the division. Are they even they're in the wild card? I think
they lost the wild card yesterday.
They lost the wild card?
Toronto has it right now.
So
we're a half game we're a half game back from Toronto because of yesterday.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's not good.
But Harry, everybody knows this bullpen is garbage. Everybody knows this bullpen is garbage. It's been the subject since spring training that everyone has hated this bullpen. Everybody knew it was going to stink. And there was a good period. There was like a good 2.5, 3 month period where the bullpen was fine enough to even kind of good for about a month stretch. where they weren't blowing leads, they were getting saves, they were doing well. They had just gotten Aroldis Chapman, who was pitching well a month before the All-Star break. And then post All-Star break, they were middling. They weren't great or anything, but they were fine. Let me give you some stats, Harry. So, in this Houston series for the Rangers pitchers, just general, the Rangers pitchers did not have, there wasn't a single Rangers pitcher who had a scoreless appearance until Jose Leclerc in the 6th inning of Game 3.
That's not good, is it, Andrew?
Except for one. You want to know who it was, Harry?
I'm going to go with Brock Burke. I have no idea.
You're wrong. You want to know who it was? Our fourth string catcher, Austin Hedges, who came in in the 9th in games 1 and 2, who threw 1 2/3 innings total scoreless.
So you're saying is your best pitcher this series was your backup catcher?
Our fourth string backup catcher, yeah.
That's not good.
No, it's not. But I have some more stats, Harry. I have some more.
Oh God.
So, let's see here. Where did I dig this out? Okay. So the Rangers are 4 in their last have won 4 games of their last 19 games. That's pretty bad.
Yeah.
Going back to the day before, so as of Game 2 of this series, the Texas Ranger bullpen in 18 games has gone 2 in 12 in save opportunities. Just think about that.
This is the team that has more blown saves than saves on the year, for the record.
Exactly. So, this is bad. The bullpen is pitching to a 7.41 ERA in that stretch. Yeah. And this is just brutal. If you look at the guys who have actually pitched in this stretch. So in this stretch of futility, we're going to go back to August 24th, which is around when this shit show started, especially around that Milwaukee series where they got swept by the Brewers.
And then that Twins series.
All 3 of them?
Joey Gallo's revenge tour. Shouldn't have traded him, I guess.
I don't know, man. Look, in that stretch, since October 24th to today, so Thursday, September 7th, let's see, who has been the best Rangers pitcher? Technically Will Smith, who has a wins above replacement of 0 in that stretch. So exactly replacement level for Will Smith.
You know, I actually saw a statistic. I think it was in maybe the Dallas Morning News. And it said that, I think since the All-Star break, do you know how much the entire Rangers pitching staff has been worth, Andrew? You want to take a guess?
Oh, at least like maybe one win above replacement.
Yeah, you're pretty close. It was 1.7.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
But, wait, I forgot to mention, it's actually negative 1.7.
Yeah?
So, according to wins above replacement, if it is to be believed, the Rangers could have simply called up their AAA staff and gotten comparable results.
Yeah, this is bad. This is historically... This is a collapse that I have not seen since like Game 7 of 2011. This is horrible. And not only that...
Lights were too bright, I guess.
Not only that, but we keep bringing up these losers who keep appearing on this bullpen staff because our geriatric manager just refuses to bring up one of the young guys from AAA to see what he's got. Instead, we brought back Ian fucking Kennedy. Ian Kennedy, Harry, who we DFA'd at the start of the year. He went off, I think he went to Pittsburgh or something, got DFA'd there, and is now back with us on the Major League roster. It's just a disaster. It's a disaster bullpen. Josh Spores, who historically had been not a good pitcher this year, throughout most of the year, he was doing very well. Josh Spores, throughout this futility stretch, is pitching to a 22.09 ERA. This is not good. Not good. Brock Burke, one of the only good pieces in the bullpen over the last 3 years, pitching to a 12 ERA. Let's see, who else? Dane Dunning, in his one relief appearance, scored himself a 15 ERA because he gave up 9 runs after being good to start the year. He was one of the league ERA leaders when he became eligible.
I don't want to be that guy, but I feel like anyone who expected Dane Dunning to continue to be a top ERA pitcher probably could have seen this one coming, you know?
What I'm saying, Harry, is that this bullpen is terrible. We all know it.
That's true.
And it's not as if this team didn't recognize it as a problem and tried to do something about it. They brought in Aroldis Chapman for a reason. He's been blowing saves. And I got to be honest, Harry, the easy thing to do for this team is to just blame the bullpen. Just blame the fact that the bullpen is here, that nothing was done about it after they spent, half the GDP of a small African country to go bring in Jacob deGrom and Nathan Eovaldi to shore up the starting rotation. I understand people's frustrations with that kind of thing. I like Chris Young, the new general manager. I understand the moves that were made. They were a good process at the time. People are melting down because they traded a young pitcher, Cole Reagans, to Kansas City for Aroldis Chapman. And
He's been really good.
Cole Reagans has been amazing for in his last 6 or 7 starts for the Royals. But this is the nature of how rental reliever deals go. The trading team, the team that's trading the reliever is gonna get back a guy who's gonna be there the long term. And something that people might not know is that throughout spring training, the Rangers and the Royals share joint practices. So this coaching staff on the Royals has been looking at Reagans probably for a long time. And when they finally had something that the Rangers wanted, they wanted Reagans. So I disagree that you don't do that trade again. I understand that the results right now look bad, but it was good process at the time. Bringing in Jordan Montgomery, Max Scherzer at the trade deadline, good process, good moves at the time. It's just all falling apart in this last 3 weeks. And
see, Andrew,
yeah.
I gotta interject there because I think you're making a great point, but I have to ask, sort of, the elephant in the room for the Rangers has to be at some point, right? Like, they can't develop pitchers at all.
This is a problem.
When pitchers come to play in Texas, they pitch badly. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think you're right that it's hard to blame the moves, the trades. It's certainly hard to blame Bruce Bochy. Like, he literally does not have a reliable reliever to go to. So, I don't know what he's supposed to do on a night-to-night basis. But, you may recall last year, Andrew, when the Mariners were really in the doldrums, we started arguing about, like, is Jerry Dipoto a good GM? And one of the big things we brought up a lot was, well, the Mariners haven't really developed a good young hitter. You know what I mean?
Right.
Now, the Mariners have been hitting a lot better, both since then in that year, 2022, and then in this year. So that's kind of gone away, but the question now has to be asked, when's the last time Texas has really put together a real, like, feather in their cap kind of development achievement for pitching?
Martin Perez?
Who's regressed this year?
What'd you say he didn't come through?
I said he's regressed this year.
Yes.
Not a long-term success.
Yeah, and he's like 30, 31, 32 right now. And for the majority of his career, he was middling. So you can't really count that. Thankfully, Jack Leiter has finally started to string a couple good starts together. Thankfully,
After they attempted to ruin him by rushing him.
yeah. So he's still in Double A. But you might remember Cole Winn, who
Yep.
was a good Rangers prospect. He's been completely destroyed. He last had his good year, what, in like 2019, 2020? And ever since then, he has cratered. He has cratered since then. They just moved him into the bullpen recently to try to get anything out of him. He just gave up 9 runs the other day in like a third of an inning of work.
But Andrew, I want to throw out a name for you because you might remember. I think it was 2021, maybe. I think it was 21. The Phillies were trying to surge into it might have been last year. No, I think it was 2 years ago.
2021.
The Rangers had this really good pitcher named Kyle Gibson, kind of a ground ball guy.
Yeah.
He was their best pitcher, and they trade him to the Phillies for a very highly regarded pitching prospect, Spencer Howard.
Yep.
Who is just so bad that they basically cut bait with him. And in fact, he's now probably most famous for being one of the Yankees' few deadline acquisitions who they almost immediately cut bait with after acquiring.
Oh yeah, after getting Spencer Howard, it was hilarious how every single time he was given an opportunity to play, he was just not ready. And I'm not here to celebrate people who, miss their opportunities or something like that. I'm not here to celebrate people's failures, but the fact remains, Spencer Howard was terrible when he was up at the major league level. And when the Yankees, for some reason, traded for him, again, I don't know why, I don't know what they saw, but they traded for him at a crucial deadline where the Yankees fans were clamoring for something big. They get Spencer Howard, and Spencer Howard gets cut, 2 weeks later? Something like that?
It's not fun to say this, I think, especially coming from the perspective of someone who is sympathetic to the Rangers, but in a way, this is kind of what we thought was going to happen in a macro sense. You know what I mean? I think that was actually the most interesting thing. I read, because, thanks to you and following the Rangers, I get Dallas, Fort Worth area recommendations for my news, and there's it's called I don't know, it's Dallas Magazine or something.
Yeah.
And they did their big let's talk about the Rangers column, and they said you can get really mad about it, and this is clearly the most upsetting possible way for this team to go about it, but little above 500, terrible bullpen, unsteady starting pitching, and a good lineup was kind of what we thought we were going to get going in, and they were much better than they were supposed to be, for April, May, June, into sort of July where they were a little more unsteady, but they did get hot, and then especially as of late, it seems like they're crashing back down, but only really to the level where they were supposed to be at the start of the year, because if you recall, the big argument was, who are the contenders in the AL West, right? And they said, well, the Mariners should have a good lineup, the Astros are defending champs, obviously they're going to be good, the Angels have a chance to break out, and the Rangers have a really good lineup, and they added DeGrom. So the reason that the Mariners and the Astros were generally favored to be the real contenders was because they had a better pitching, especially a better bullpen. And it seems to me, at least, that though it took a long time for that to play out, that is kind of playing out on some level,
I understand that, but the circumstances changed after mid-season. You don't go out and acquire Max Scherzer and Jordan Montgomery, Chris Stratton, and Aroldis Chapman if just finishing 15 with a 15-game improvement over last year is still your goal. This team showed genuine potential as a World Series contender throughout the middle of the year, even without Jacob deGrom. And they made those aggressive moves in order to get themselves over that hump. And the fact that it's cratered this much, sure, is it closer to what it was originally at the start of the year with early year projections? Yeah, sure, but that's not the high watermark that we were trying to hit this year because circumstances changed. So
True.
once World Series or at least deep playoff run became the expectation after let's say July, what do you expect? Of course, people.
Well,
Are gonna be
the
mad.
Mariners, the 2019 Mariners, after blowing up the Robinson Cano era core, started 13-2. That's obviously nowhere near analogous because that was 15 games into the season, whereas the Rangers were winning the division by a lot as late as early August. But I think it's worth saying, right, that, it's unexpected. You're right, expectations do change, but this kind of is a bit of a victory for those, Fangraphs prediction models, right? That even when a team can kind of run away from them for a while, eventually they're going to get pulled back into that regression to the mean. You know what I mean?
I've got bad news, Harry. I've just a little birdie just came into my ear, and has informed me that Adolis Garcia will go onto the IL. He's going on to the 10-day IL with a right patellar tendon strain. So thank the Lord we didn't end up with some sort of ACL tear or anything, but I don't know, man. This might be season killing. Adolis is one of the heartbeats of the team.
But he hasn't played like it since the break. 199 or 196 I think he's been hitting since the break. He's had such a good year. He was actually a lot of fun at the home run derby and all that. He's a good player, but you got to wonder a little bit, you know what I mean, about how much of a blow this is when he's been playing that badly. Obviously, you don't want to see him go, but I don't know what their depth is like. Do they have someone they could bring in?
I'll give you their other outfielders, Harry. Their other outfielders are Leody Taveras, who since the break, or at least during this stretch, I forget what it is, I think he's got a 50-something ERA or WRC plus.
Woof.
He's hitting horribly. Travis Jankowski, who's also in the dumpster.
He's washed up. I don't know. The fact that you guys got any good play out of him is remarkable.
And Robbie Grossman, who, the only positive thing is that he grinds out good at-bats. That's about it.
What about Ezekiel Duran?
Zeke Duran is, I guess he can play outfield, but he's not a natural outfielder. He's an infielder by trade. And he's playing third base right now. With Josh Young also out. He's supposed to maybe start taking swings at in a couple of weeks, but the season's over in a couple of weeks, so this is bad. This is bad. You just got rid of one of your only good offensive players who has been in a slump, but this offense has been dormant for the past 3 weeks, and you get rid of one of the only guys who can have any sort of pop. It's Evan Carter time, man. It's time to bring up Evan Carter. I don't know what else to say.
Do what?
I don't know what else to say. He's torn up every single level of the minors that he's been in. He's been a borderline elite player in the minors. Continues to slug amazingly. Gets lots of walks. Gets lots of homers. Gets steals. He's an amazing player. He's the Rangers' top prospect for a reason. It's Evan Carter time, guys. I don't know what else to say. Because outside of that, we're way past the trade deadline. We got 20 games left to go.
Yep.
This is it. You need to get in a young bat, a young exciting bat in there, because what else are you gonna do? There's nowhere else to pull from. So I don't know, man.
You're right.
It's doomer hours in the DFW area right now. It's not good.
No, it's not, but I guess there's it's not over. You're half a game out of a wild card spot, though. I feel like that would probably feel like a letdown after winning the division for pretty much the entire season up to this point.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's a complete disappointment to be in this position, to be out of the wild card right now because we're half game back from Toronto.
You guys get a big series against the Blue Jays, though, right?
We have a massive 4-game series against the Blue Jays. We can go into this later when we talking about like series predictions and whatnot. But both the Rangers and the Blue Jays have a 3-game set against the 2 worst teams in the league. Blue Jays get the Royals and Rangers get the Athletics. And then immediately after that, they go into a 4-game set against each other. That's probably make or break for both teams.
That's the season for both teams.
And then after that, both teams have to play Boston. The Rangers have to play the Guardians and the Mariners on top of that. And the Blue Jays will have to play the Rays and a really hot Yankees team. So this series is critical for both squads because it's pretty evident that the Rangers probably, I don't think they can even catch the Astros anymore because they have the tiebreaker. So the only way that the Rangers are going to be able to make the playoffs is beat the Blue Jays or beat the Mariners. And that's a pretty tough road on both ways.
Yeah, and I think we'll be able to talk about that Blue Jays series in a little bit. But, Andrew, all of this, Rangers review has really put the Mariners' recent frustrations in perspective. Because talking about the Mariners, they've been on a road trip and they've actually they went 2-4. They dropped series to the Mets and the Reds. Teams you probably shouldn't be losing series to. It's a road trip and it's not great, but it certainly is not the worst case scenario, as we have just talked about. Talking about, the sort of last series against the Reds, Game 1, it was an unfortunate game, but it was kind of a classic loss. Brian Wu starts, gets roughed up. I think he gives like 5 runs pretty early on. And Julio actually hits a home run, so he has a pretty good game. He's continued to stay hot, but Mariners lose 6-3 in a game that never really felt like it was going to be won by the Mariners. That is in contrast to Game 2, where the Mariners get a big lead early on, and then, Bryce Miller just could not get deep enough into the game. Bullpen's overexposed, start to give, and Munoz gets kind of Babbitt to death with some soft contact and blows it in the 9th, lose 7-6. That one hurts, because that's a game the Mariners really should have won. Finally, in Game 3, they do avoid the sweep. Logan Gilbert, who's been Mr. Reliable this year, going deep into games, he goes deep enough. Actually, a bunch of home runs. You get one from Ford, that is Mike Ford, J.P. Crawford, and Cal Raleigh to win 8-3. And so you can kind of see that's really where the Mariners have been over this road trip. Couple missed opportunities, and you're probably a couple bad bullpen moments away from saying this is a perfectly fine road trip. But as it stands, the margin for error is very slim, with the Astros, having passed the Mariners for the division, and with the Rangers ostensibly breathing down our neck.
Technically, they are technically there.
Speaking.
By the way, in perspective, the Rangers have had a complete collapse and are still within 2 games of the division. That's
how good
incredible.
they were. There was a point, actually, I think, where the Orioles hadn't quite gotten hot yet, and the Rays had fallen back down to earth from their ridiculous start, that the Rangers had the best record in baseball, or maybe just at least the best in the AL.
I think it was best in the AL. But anyways, continue with the Mariners, please.
But, when we talked about the Rangers, we also talked about their season as a whole, and I think it's worth doing that for the Mariners as well, because you're looking at a team that snapped a 21-year playoff drought the previous year. The longest in North American sports at the time. Very optimistic. They have a very fun run in the wild card round, and then they get swept in a series that's closer than it really looked.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt you. Evan Carter is coming up.
Are you kidding me?
Yes, Evan Carter is up.
That's very exciting.
Breaking news, ladies and gentlemen. But anyways, yes, I'm sorry. I'm excited, but we can talk about it in the series later.
No, we can talk about it in the projections.
Sure.
We can predict whether Evan Carter will have a big impact in that so important Toronto series. But yeah, basically the Mariners come in with these big expectations, and they say themselves, we're coming for the division. And after all that hype, they start the year at about 500. and they stay within 3 or 4 games of 500, essentially until late July.
Yeah.
And the culprit, the culprit, is really not that hard to find. It's the offense. I mean, Andrew, you know, we were going to games, we were watching games. That Mariners offense was ridiculously frustrating. We had 3 of like the top 10 strikeout guys. It was Gino, Teo, and Julio. We're all striking out a ton. Nobody could get on base. And when we got on base, we couldn't drive people in to save our lives. It was a brutal offensive environment, despite the fact that the rotation had overcome significant injuries, like Robbie Ray and Marco Gonzalez. We brought up Emerson Hancock, obviously Bryce Miller, Brian Wu. A lot of B's. But we brought these guys up, they hit the ground running, and the rotation's really good. And we couldn't get there. Then the team starts to get hot. We win 8 games in a row. We're playing really well. We even take 3 or 4 from the Astros in mid-July. And this is where the most controversial moment of the Mariners season, I think, occurs. Because at the trade deadline, the Mariners do not pull a Rangers. They don't trade for a closer. They trade their closer, Paul Sewald, to the Diamondbacks for 3 guys. Dominic Canzone, who's sort of a corner outfielder slash first baseman, technically, slash DH kind of guy. Josh Rojas, who's a third baseman who can also play second base. And a sort of second baseman who's actually in AAA right now named Ryan Bliss. So, as you may recall, Andrew, that move did not go over well at first.
No, this was I would say the reaction to that one was a lot worse. It was a lot more confusion than anger. It kind of reminds me of the Kendall Graveman trade a couple of years ago. But I don't know. Graveman wasn't as much of a fan favorite as Sewald was, so
no, he wasn't. It was really a blow because it felt like they were giving up on the team. As it turns out, Canzone has been quite good. Josh Rojas has hit like 290 or something for the team.
Wow.
Despite starting 0 for 13 as a Mariner, he's just caught fire. So, just ridiculously good. I don't even want to say that. It's been a sort of an injection of life into that lineup. And meanwhile, essentially since the All-Star break, everyone's just gotten hot at the right time. I mean, there was a stretch in August, like a couple weeks in, where every single Mariners hitter had a WRC plus above 100. That is above average. So, yeah, you win a lot of games when you have the best rotation in the league, a top-tier bullpen, and every single guy who steps to the plate on a given day is going to be better than your average MLB hitter. That's going to win you a lot of games. So the Mariners are able to make up a lot of ground on the Rangers, as it so happens. And they kind of shoot into this big series here with the Astros just a couple weeks ago, and they sweep them. 3-game sweep. It feels like this is going to be huge. This is like the moment. They take the division lead, in fact, just towards the end of August. I remember talking with you the day it happened, Andrew. That was during one of the Minnesota series for Texas. It was, I believe, Jonathan Hernandez's walk-off walk.
Do not remind me. I don't. Oh my God, that was so horrifically bad because they had just brought him back up because they were, again, rotating anybody in the bullpen who had a pulse. So they bring in Jonathan Hernandez, who had pitched decently in AAA. They bring him back up. He's been awful the past 2-3 years. They keep him around. And then they throw him into a game. He lucks into 2 strikeouts. And then he walks the bases loaded. And then he walks the winning run in. It was...
But who had that first walk? Who started that rally for the Twins, Andrew?
It wasn't Gallo. I think it was...
It was.
It was Gallo?
It was Joey Gallo.
Oh my God, that's amazing. But anyways, we don't need to talk more about this miserable fucking bullpen. We'll talk about it later. But yeah, like late August, Mariners still had the lead, right?
Yeah, I mean, you got to look at, when you talk about August, I mean, the conversation starts with Julio Rodriguez. I mean, he won Player of the Month. He actually has now the MLB record for most hits in a 4-game span with 17. he was just, he's been good throughout the year, sort of very good defense, decent power, but strikeouts, not able to get it. Basically the ball wasn't falling for him, and he was striking out too much. And he just turned a corner since essentially the All-Star break, and he has just been one of, if not the best hitter on the planet over the past month or so. And, because of that, you get into the situation where all of a sudden everything else starts clicking. Teoscar Hernandez has been one of the best hitters in the month of August. Ty France, who has had a very uneven year and has even been quite bad for long stretches like in June, stepped up significantly and was a good hitter. And of course, Josh Rojas was somehow like a major contributor. Kind of head-scratching considering he started 0 for 13 with some of the worst at-bats I've ever seen, but I guess he just figured it out. So, good for him. But it leaves them in a position where now, after a bit of a disappointing road trip, they're behind the Astros by a game, but they secured the tiebreaker on the Astros by sweeping them in late August. They get one more 3-game set against the Astros. They're going to see the Rangers a lot, 7 times, and they're going to have to play the Rays coming up here in Tampa Bay. So it's not an easy schedule by any means, Andrew, but it is a winnable schedule, and perhaps most importantly, the Mariners have a lot of control over their own destiny. If they beat the teams they're trying to pass, if they beat the teams they're trying to stay ahead of, they will get in the playoffs, and they can even win the division pretty easily. The problem is, if you can't take a series from the Mets, it's hard to see that turning around and becoming, we're going to beat up on the Astros again.
Well, I will also note, the Mariners played, 750, 800 ball in August?
Yeah, no, they've been ridiculous in August. And in late.
There comes to a point where that's going to come back to, back to reality a little bit, a little regression to the mean there. But I do believe that the success from August is somewhat sustainable because a lot of the guys figured out how to hit a baseball again. So even though I don't think they're going to have, what did they go in August, 25-4 or something like that?
They won 21 games, which is a team record for a single month. Yeah, it was a ridiculous month.
So, yeah, I think there's probably going to be a little regression to the mean, but I think they'll still be solid, for sure.
My main concern remains that guys like what you see in that series against the Reds, for example. You have Brian Wu and Bryce Miller, both rookies, both kids who have been a huge part of the Mariners' success as pieces of the rotation. They're just not able to go deep enough. And my concern would be with innings caps and general fatigue. If the Mariners' rotation starts to waver a little bit, the bullpen is good, but they did trade Sewald, and the bullpen is not invincible, I guess I'd say.
Right.
So my concern for this road trip would not be so much that they lost these series, but how they did, in that I can see if the rotation starts to flag a little bit, that's probably a recipe for real problems down the road. The hope being that Miller and Wu can rally down the stretch, of course.
Of course. And they are probably in the best position out of anyone with the wild cards, other than whoever doesn't win the AL East. But they're definitely in the most comfortable position, I'd say.
Though it's interesting, and there is one bit of intrigue, because even if Texas, not if Texas collapses, but if Texas hangs around, they actually killed the Mariners earlier this year. So the Mariners have 7 games left, and to take the tiebreaker, they need to go 6-1 against the Rangers in those last 2 series, which is probably not going to happen. But it does point out that while the Mariners are in a good spot and that they have the tiebreaker on the Astros, the Rangers theoretically have, who are only, a game or 2 behind the Mariners, could be a threat. Now, that would require the Rangers to get their act together.
That's a trick question, Harry. You know that's a trick question.
But I think that gives us a pretty good picture of where we're at. With this 3-team race, you have the Astros, who were slow to start and have just kind of been chugging along. Not as hot and cold as the Mariners. They were consistently a good team, and then they just started picking up pace. They've actually been the second best team in baseball after the Mariners, so they've kind of quietly caught fire, though the Mariners were obviously a hotter team and got most of the attention. And the Rangers, meanwhile, have kind of crashed back down to earth. But now everyone's within 3 or so games of each other, so it's still very much a race in this last month.
I gotta say, man, if this is what playing for a pennant feels like late in September, I don't know if I want to feel it. I'm gonna be honest. This is
Well, usually it's a little bit more invigorating when your team isn't collapsing into the wild card race, but rather surging into
right,
it, you know?
right.
But that kind of gives us a picture of the MLB present. But I'd like to take us back a little bit, Andrew.
Right.
To this week in MLB history, because I found some gems.
That's right. We do history here, folks. We like
That's right.
we like the past. So
I took events from each weekday in MLB history, starting with this Monday, September 4th. Now, Andrew, does the name Robin Ventura ring a bell?
Of course. How could it not? The guy who was hit by a pitcher 6 times in one at bat. You have to love that guy.
Robin Ventura might have been involved in the greatest moment in Texas Rangers franchise history.
Yeah.
The Nolan Ryan headlock. Everyone knows him for that, right?
Of course.
But actually, on September 4th, 1995, was Ventura's revenge. He became the 8th player in MLB history to hit 2 grand slams in one game against Texas.
Well, I struggle to call it a revenge, Harry, because the whole headlock fiasco happened in 1990, 1991.
It's revenge.
So, it was a good couple of years later.
Well, you know what they say, Andrew. Revenge is a dish best served cold.
Especially when
5
the guy
years
you
to
want
make
to have revenge against is already retired.
Well, it's not his fault. Nolan Ryan's shoulder just popped one day, you know?
Yeah, one day in Seattle. That's depressing.
That's depressing. Now, another thing that happened in September 4th. This is a classic. I always like to go back to like the 1890s because that's a great era of baseball, Andrew. It's just so bizarre. Cap Anson, Hall of Famer, great player, showed up in a wig and a long white beard to please the crowd, wore the costume in the game, and won it 5-3.
That's awesome.
That is, his Colts beat the Bean Eaters 5-3.
The Bean Eaters?
And I gotta ask, Andrew, why can't we have wigs and long fake beards in baseball these days? You know what I mean?
Well, didn't I forget who the pitcher was, but he was the pitcher who inspired everyone on the Giants to start growing out their beards.
Oh, the beard. What's his name? Brian something or other.
Something like that. I forget the name, but
it wasn't a fake beard.
No, it was a real beard.
So, now we move on to September 5th, Andrew.
Right.
September 5th, 2017, J.P. Crawford makes his MLB debut. Pop quiz, Andrew. Who did J.P. Crawford make his MLB debut for?
The Philadelphia Phillies.
That's correct. Now, here's one for you. In 1971, J.R. Richard tied Carl Spooner's Major League record by striking out 15 in his first game.
Hold on. That's a fantastic name. Carl Spooner?
That's actually not what I was going to focus on. Because J.R. Richards is a guy you might not have heard of.
No.
But he was one of the most dominant pitchers of the sort of early 70s. He blew out his arm, and he ended up homeless.
Whoa.
It's really a quite sad story. He had really large hands, and so he had just a ridiculous repertoire. He had some great grips, his curveball especially. And he was so dominant, and he hurt himself. And he fell on very hard times. So it's not a happy story, Andrew. But I think that J.R. Richards is one of those guys that, it's easy to forget about because he didn't really put up the career numbers that you'd expect for a truly, like a great pitcher. But he's, when he was on in his early career, he was something special. Now, September 6th, that is this Wednesday. If you're an Orioles fan, you'll probably know this is actually when Ripken broke Gehrig's record in 1995 for consecutive games played. Now, here's one for you, Andrew. See, what have Yankees fans wanted all year? Pretty much since the beginning. Like, what is the move they want the franchise to make?
Go get a ring.
Not quite.
Oh wait,
I'm
trade
thinking more
for a
of an
left fielder.
addition.
Trade for a left fielder.
I'm even thinking more of an addition by subtraction kind of thing, Andrew, if you're picking up what I'm putting down.
As in, fire Aaron Boone?
Bingo. Now, back in the day, when it was the elder Steinbrenner owning the team, you get ridiculous things like this. In 1981, the Yankees were the best team in baseball through the first half, and they fired their manager, Gene Michael, anyway. The best part is that poor Bob Lemon, who had to take over for Gene Michael, who had managed the club a couple years before, guided them to a sub-500 second half.
That's terrible. And Bob Lemon's a Hall of Famer.
Yeah. So, Andrew, maybe the lesson here is that, you really want to fire your manager, but it can get worse.
The grass isn't always greener, man.
This one I just enjoy. In 1945, a Philadelphia Athletics catcher named Greek George earned an indefinite suspension for punching an umpire in the face over a call. Can we bring that back?
What?
I like how the little blurb on Baseball Almanac says, now he never saw the majors again, but that was more likely to do with his miserable batting average than it was with the suspension.
That's insane. You can definitely tell lots of players want to do very violent things to the umpires who don't call things their way. Which, by the way, I'm still surprised there's still so many bad home plate umpires.
I mean, the power, they just don't get replaced. You know what I mean? Once you've made it, you've made it. I mean, look at Joe West. He went senile approximately 2006, and he was still there for another 15 years. So
Cowboy Joe West, man.
He has his own podcast, you know.
Oh, that's right. I forget about this.
He also edited his own Wikipedia page, and he's got like a username. Everyone knew it was him because his username was like Cowboy Umpire 07 or something like that. I'm serious.
That's so funny.
All right, so for the day we're recording this, September 7th, I went a little earlier here, Andrew, because I thought there were some fun ones. So in 1889, there was the most controversial game in the history of the American Association. So I don't know if you're a big St. Louis Browns fan or if you're a big Bridegrooms fan. You got a team in this?
Not particularly, no.
Well, that's good because you might get angry with what happens here. The Browns are holding a 4-2 lead in the 9th inning over the Bridegrooms. And then they say, oh, it's too dark to continue. So I guess we'll have to call it. But the umpire actually says, well, we could just light some candles in front of the bench and keep playing.
No, you can't do that. You can't do that.
But, so the umpire says, we're going to have to finish this game. The Browns get bottles thrown at them as they try to leave the field in protest, and they are forced to forfeit the game.
Oh, dude, that's tough. That's tough.
As a huge Bridegrooms fan, I think this was an excellent judgment here. Also, here's one for you. You know, pitchers these days, they're so weak. In 1908, on September 7th, Walter Johnson pitched his third consecutive shutout in 4 days.
What?
Yeah.
What? I'm sorry.
4 days.
I forget.
3 shutouts.
I'm sorry. I forget they used to do this to people.
And let me be clear here. When I say shutout, I don't mean, oh, they didn't score a run and he pitched in that game. I mean he pitched the whole game.
Yeah, like, it was a complete game shutout, yes?
A 2-hitter, in fact.
Wow. That's insane.
So, that gives you a picture. Alright, now September 8th, which is Friday, and my last day for this day in MLB history, 1995 was a good year in general. Cleveland actually ended their postseason drought by clinching the AL Central with a win over the Orioles. Do you know how long Cleveland's postseason drought was heading into the 1995 season?
It was probably already, I want to say 90 to 80-something years.
No, postseason.
Yeah, the postseason drought. That's how long it was, right?
It was 41.
Fuck.
You're making me look bad, Andrew.
Shit.
We'll just have to edit you saying 10 in?
Was it 5?
2?
But
yeah.
But yeah.
41 years. That's remarkable, Andrew.
That's pretty good.
You don't see that every day. And also, in 98, on September 8th, Mark McGwire actually broke Roger Maris's 37-year-old home run record for a single season.
Cheater.
He hit 62, number 62, off of a Cubs pitcher. And it was at home, so it's a very exciting rivalry game. Obviously, it was McGwire versus Sosa. Very exciting. And he did it all on a balanced breakfast. So, just a remarkable achievement for Mark McGwire. Imagine how much better Roger Maris could have been that season if he had been eating a balanced breakfast. You know,
I mean, look, there are people who eat their Wheaties and people who don't. All right, it's not our problem if players don't eat their Wheaties. I don't understand.
I couldn't agree more. That's why Mark McGwire is my favorite clean MLB player. Now, Andrew, that is all I have for this week in baseball history. So I'm going to turn it back over to you to give our kind listeners a preview of what this Rangers-Blue Jays matchup has in store for them.
So this is going to be a little bit interesting because, like I said before, both teams, as of right now, coming out of their final, or at least penultimate, off day of the season, are going to both be going into series against the two worst teams in the AL. Rangers are playing the A's, and the Royals will be going up against the Blue Jays. So, in this Blue Jays-Rangers matchup, it's going to be a bit interesting, Harry. So, the all-time record between these two is 220 games to 233. That is 220 wins for the Rangers and 233 wins for the Blue Jays. So the Rangers have a 48% win rate against the Blue Jays, which something that's also very surprising is that in terms of postseason, the Rangers and Blue Jays have only met twice in the postseason, which is pretty surprising considering both teams have been around since the 70s, Rangers in 72 and Blue Jays in 77, and they've both been good at the same times. Blue Jays and Rangers were good in the early to mid 90s, Rangers especially in the late 90s. Both were good in the late 2000s and early 2010s, but surprisingly they never met each other in the playoffs until 2015 and 2016. Now, obviously, everybody remembers the 2015, nail-biting ALDS, where it was a 3-2 victory for the Blue Jays that ended on the Jose Bautista bat flip that everybody loves.
Except for Rougned
Odor. I don't understand. That gave us literally one of the best memories in the last 10 years of baseball. People need to stop being mad at the Rougned Odor punch. It was the best punch in baseball. People need to stop being mad, okay?
No, that's not true anymore. Honestly, Jose Ramirez's punch on Tim Anderson's even better this year.
It was pretty good.
He just went down. I mean, you don't see that every day. But yes, it's true. There's certainly some bad blood. But Andrew, you said they met twice, so surely there must have been some drama when they met again.
I mean, it was a sweep. I don't know what you want me to say. The Rangers suffering the sweep at the hands of the Blue Jays unceremoniously kicked off their long-lasting playoff drought. They have not made it back to the playoffs since 2016 and since this sweep. So the Rangers, hopefully, if they can get their act together, can break that here in a couple of weeks. But it's been 6 years, Harry. It's been 6 years since
that must be very hard for you. A 6-year playoff drought?
Man.
I wouldn't know anything about that.
Nope. Nothing at all. You don't understand, Harry.
I don't understand. That much is clear. Now, Andrew, there's clearly some history between these teams, but any big highlights outside of course, the most iconic bat flip probably in MLB history, and Rougned Odor deciding to enact some vigilante justice.
There is, and I'm happy you asked, because in 1991, let me see if I got my dates right. Hold on. There we go. So, of course, if you're a fan of the Texas Rangers, that means you're a fan of Nolan Ryan. And Nolan Ryan threw his final no-hitter, his seventh and final no-hitter, against the Blue Jays in 1991. The catcher was Mike Stanley. This was May 1st, 1991. The opposing pitcher, by the way, was Jimmy Key for the Blue Jays, who's a criminally underrated pitcher. Only second best pitcher in Blue Jays history, second only to Alek Manoah, of course.
Pressure is something you put in your tires, Andrew.
Exactly. But that's honestly not the most interesting thing about this game. It's because, of course, Nolan Ryan gets his no-hitter. Everybody's already talked about this. But nobody talks about Rangers' third baseman in this game, Steve Buechele. Now, Harry, if you've been aware of other sports and backups in other sports, you might be familiar with the name Buechele, although I don't expect you to know. But
it's not coming to mind.
It's not coming to mind? Well, I will bring it to mind here in a bit. But Steve Buechele is a fascinating character in Texas Rangers lore. He was the third baseman for the Rangers. Had his debut in 1985 and lasted with the Rangers till 91, and then came back for one final season back in 95. Long time Ranger, was a third baseman for this no-hitter, but the interest doesn't really come from him on the field or even during his playing days. Everything interesting about Steve Buechele happens after he retires. So, he retires in 95, right? But in 2008, he joins the Rangers pregame and postgame show on Fox as an analyst. So, all right, fine. The broadcasters do this all the time. They bring in old players to talk about their teams. They don't really know much. But Steve Buechele somehow managed to parlay this into a 10-year managing career with the Texas Rangers. He, starting in 2009, became the manager of the High A Bakersfield Blaze in the Texas Rangers minor league system. And from 2010 to 2013, he was with the Frisco Rough Riders. And in 2014, he was the manager of the Round Rock Express. Both teams that are still around today for the Texas Rangers. But that's not all. In 2015, he was elevated from manager of the Round Rock Express to the third base coach for the Rangers from 2015 to 2018. And after 2018, he ended up going into the front office where he's still there today. So, interesting on Steve Buechele, but that isn't all, Harry. That is not all. So, his sons also ended up playing baseball. His oldest son, Garrett, ended up getting drafted by the Giants in 2011 in the 14th round. He never broke with the majors, but played for the University of Oklahoma and was in the Giants system, but never broke the majors. His middle son Tanner also played for Oklahoma, didn't go pro. His two daughters went to Oklahoma as well. But NFL fans might be familiar with his youngest son Shane, because Shane did not play baseball, but he played quarterback, and he ended up going to UT Austin, and wasn't able to stick around there. And this was right when the transfer portal was starting to become a real thing. So this was back in 2019 when Joe Burrow ended up going to LSU, ended up winning a natty. I think it was in 2018 or 19 that Shane Buechele transferred from Texas to SMU, noted in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, started for the Mustangs, ends up getting picked up by as an undrafted free agent to the Chiefs, and becomes Patrick Mahomes' backup for 2 years, where he has just now been released and picked up by the Bills to go back up Josh Allen. So, Shane Buechele, backup quarterback in the NFL, and his dad Steve. So, that was that. And also, one last thing about Steve Buechele. One final thing, Harry. He attended Stanford from 1979 to, I think, 1982 when he got drafted by the Rangers. Got drafted by, I think it was Pittsburgh. I think it ended up being. But 79 to 82. Do you want to know who his roommate was?
There was a good football player who went to that school around that time, Andrew.
John Elway was his roommate. So, that's about it on Steve Buechele. I thought it was fascinating. But anyways...
That's quite the web of connections.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, folks, we got to talk about this series that's actually happening in the present day. And by the time we come back for next week's show, it'll all be over. And we'll find out if the Texas Rangers season is all over by next week. But it's gonna be a strange series. Adolis has just been lost, probably for the year, with like a strained patellar tendon or whatever. We'll see how Evan Carter does, because he's just now been brought up. So that'll be fun to see. He makes his debut tomorrow against Oakland. But what do you want me to say? This is make or break for both teams. Both teams are playing other teams that are sandwiched right next to them in the playoff race for that third wild card spot. Rangers obviously having to compete with the Mariners and Red Sox to close out the year, and Blue Jays having to compete with the Red Sox, Rays, Yankees, and Rangers. So pretty impactful series. And I don't even know what to say. The Blue Jays have been pretty middling these past couple of weeks, but the Rangers are cratering. So we'll see if they get their act together for this one. I project if this isn't a series split, it's going to be a Blue Jays probable win, just because of how terrible the Rangers are playing right now. But we'll see.
So what is your prediction for the series record in the end?
Probably 3-2. 3-2 Toronto, I'd say.
You mean 3-1?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, 3-1. Excuse me.
Shades of that playoff series.
The scars never go away, Harry.
Clearly they don't. Well, 3-1, Andrew, I'm going to be optimistic. I believe in this Rangers team. I believe in them so much, I'm going to give them the split.
Wow, what a compliment.
Don't ask me why, but Evan Carter's up, and I think the vibes will be slightly better.
I think so, too. I think people will be excited to see Carter up, so we'll see.
So, there you go. It's my turn, I guess, with the Mariners' big upcoming series against, in fact, another very good AL East team, the Tampa Bay Rays. Now, they actually have a funny history, Andrew, because just looking at the overall record, the Mariners are surprisingly dominant, 111-86 in the Mariners' favor. And you want to know a couple fun facts about that record?
Sure.
Number one, the home team has won 50.1% of the time. There's very little correlation between being at home and winning in the Mariners and Rays all-time series, which I just found interesting because you would kind of expect that,
the home teams would have a little bit more of an advantage, right?
But apparently not. Here's the interesting one. The Mariners have never lost a series against the Rays over the course of a decade. So what that means is when the Rays first came into existence in the 80s, the Mariners took the 80s series. They took the 90s series. They took the 2000s series. They took the 2010 series, and so far, they have taken the 2020 series. So, over the course of a decade, the Mariners are a pretty reliable bet to get the better of the Rays. Now, you may recall, Andrew, that in 2021, a scrappy little Mariners team swept the then defending AL champion Rays at home in a 4-game series. And there's one specific game I want to highlight. It was on Father's Day, and a guy named Shedlong Jr. hit a walk-off grand slam, and we were there.
I still have the picture.
That game. And that was a fun team, and that was a fun sweep of the Rays. Unfortunately, in 2022, the Rays did take the series. However, the Mariners have some recent history, as in this year, because the Mariners season really reached its low point, its nadir, in 2023, after losing 15-4 to the Rays on, I believe, June 30th. I'm sorry, early in the show I might have said that they were around 500 until late July. That's not true. I meant late June. But on June 30th, they were actually booed. And if you've ever been to a Seattle sports game, you know how exceptional that is.
Yeah.
Seattle fans just don't boo. But they booed them then, and the Mariners turned around to win that series. They bounced back and took the last two. And that really started their hot streak. They tied the Orioles for the best team in baseball in the month of July, and then they had the best month in franchise history in August. So there's a lot going on there. But Andrew, it's not just that. Because, I mean, if you know anything about the Mariners GM/president of baseball operations, Jerry Dipoto, you know that he loves to trade.
Of course, Trader Jerry. How could I forget?
And there's no team that Trader Jerry likes to trade with more than the Tampa Bay Rays. So, I thought we could just remember some guys. Here's one for you, Andrew. Drew Smyly in 2017 was acquired by the Mariners from the Rays in exchange for Ryan Yarborough and a young Malik Smith.
Malik
Smith. Do you not remember him?
I can't say I do.
There's a name. Well, he'll come back. That's the crazy part. Now, Drew Smyly, Mariners fans may recall, was supposed to be a big part of that 2017 rotation, and he blew out his arm in an exhibition game, and proceeded to never pitch for the Mariners. And that Mariners pitching staff in 2017 actually set the record at the time for most pitchers used in a single season. Do you want to know who the leading pitcher in terms of innings pitched for that 2017 Mariners team was, Andrew?
Well, Felix was still around, right?
Nope. Felix got hurt. Wasn't Felix.
Uh-oh. Please
It's a name, Andrew.
Please tell me that it was like Dylan Moore or something like that.
Well, it couldn't have been Dylan Moore, the pitcher. It was a position player.
Exactly. They had used so many pitchers, they had to go to Dylan Moore.
Ariel Miranda.
What?
And if you say, who is Ariel Miranda? That meant that you had the pleasure of not watching the 2017 Mariners. That was a rough year. So I've never really forgiven that Drew Smyly trade, even though it really wasn't Dipoto's fault. He couldn't have known that Smyly was going to get injured. But yeah, that was a year. That could have been a great move if it hadn't been for that. Now, in 2018, you might recall the Mariners started out really strong, had a good June. They were a fun team that year. They were winning the division as late June that year. And they decided to acquire a couple pieces from the Rays in 2018 to sort of bolster their team. Namely, Alex Colomé, who would become the setup man behind Edwin Diaz, and Denard Span in his final year. Both played pretty well for the Mariners down the stretch. But it's worth remembering that Alex Colomé would go on to try and reprise his role as a closer elsewhere, including in Minnesota, where it was a total disaster.
Not ideal.
Not ideal. Womp womp. Now, after that 2018 season, Dipoto has to blow it up. And where does he look when he's blowing it up? But back to his old buddies, the Rays. He sends him Zunino. Mike Zunino, longtime Mariners catcher. And he acquires Jake Fraley. Jake the Snake Fraley, who... he got a lot of walks. He got hurt a lot. He had one really nice catch, which you may recall.
Of course, I do remember that catch.
But he's on the Reds now. He was part of the deal, I believe, to acquire Castillo?
It was probably the Castillo,
or no.
right? Or was it the Winker trade?
It was either the Castillo or the Winker-Suarez trade. It might have been the Gino trade, because I don't remember him playing for the team in 2022. Let me look this up real quick. Jake Fraley trade. You can cut this part out, Andrew. He was traded in the Winker deal. So yeah, he was traded in between the after the 2021 season, before the start of the 2022 season. Yeah. So there's a little fun one. And then Malik Smith comes home after a couple really solid campaigns, hitting around 300 for the Rays, stealing a ton of bases. The Mariners are trying to get younger. They acquire Malik Smith, and he just regresses miserably in 2019. They basically just give up on him after that. But then, in 2021, after trading Kendall Graveman, their closer, Jerry acquires Diego Castillo to be the team's new closer, who promptly is good, but not as good as Paul Sewald down the stretch, is pretty good in 2022, and in 2023 is so bad that he was exiled to AAA, where last I checked he had an ERA over 5.
Oh, wow.
So, got a couple good years out of him, but that seems to be at the end of the road for him. The point being, though, that in the Dipoto era, Andrew, there have been so many trades. You can really, I'll admit, Andrew, I'll admit that these are not like huge names, really, but it's still remarkable to see just how much these two organizations have linked up over the few years.
And Mike Zunino was probably the best out of all of those.
I'd say so. I mean, he was an all-star for the Rays, and I think he's sort of towards the end now. He was with Cleveland at the beginning of this year, and they DFA'd him, so I think he's probably going to retire, but very good defensive catcher. His hitting development was rushed by the Mariners, and he was never quite the hitter he could have been. A lot of power, though.
I was about to say, like, I thought he was still in the league, but I guess as of right now, he's not.
I don't think so. No, I think he was. I think he was been let go. Though maybe he'll get added. I don't know, as a guy to mentor some kids or something. So to get back to the present, we actually do have a series on our hands, and it's a 4-gamer, and a pretty important one, because if the Mariners can survive this series, then really the tough series down the stretch is going to be, or series rather, down the stretch are going to be the Astros for 3 games, and potentially the Rangers, depending on whether they want to decide to win again, ever. But, starting out with Game 1, Mariners have Castillo on the mound. Got to feel pretty good about that game. Game 2, they got Kirby on the mound again. Got to feel pretty good. Then it's Brian Wu and Bryce Miller for the back half of that series. And overall, the Rays have been the best hitting team in the AL. They've been so good, and the Mariners have gotten hot, and they're now up there. So, what it comes down to here, Andrew, is basically it's a tale of 2 halves here, right? The first half, the Mariners have their 2 aces, Castillo and Kirby, on the mound. You got to feel pretty good about that. Then it's a matter of Brian Wu and Bryce Miller, and this is what I was talking about earlier on with why I was a little concerned by this Reds series. This is the difference between the Mariners maybe stumbling into a wild card spot versus competing for the division. If they can get good games out of their aces, Kirby, Castillo, to a lesser extent Logan Gilbert, that's great, but they need guys like Wu and Miller to continue to give them good outings, and that's really the big question mark for this team. I am optimistic, however, and I think that having Castillo and Kirby on the bump gives the Mariners some momentum. I generally like the Mariners to take 3 of 4 here, though I think that's admittedly optimistic, and I think a split is very likely as well.
Yeah, I was about to say the Rays have still been really good, even in this even in these last couple of weeks. They've still been above 500 in their last couple of games. So it'll be interesting because even assuming the Mariners make the playoffs, which they most likely will, you will probably have to play the Rays. I don't know how the seeding shakes out or anything, but it'll probably be the Rays to be the second seed in the AL, and they'll probably end up playing the Mariners, so that'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, I think that works out, because the first and the second wild cards play each other, and the winner of that game plays the top seed. So, and then the second seed, or rather the worst division, plays the third wild card. Is that right?
Is that how it works?
Yeah, it is. It is.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I remember because there was a lot of talk last year about how the Mariners should tank to try and get Cleveland instead of Toronto. And Toronto didn't win that division. The Yankees won that division that year. So it's first hosts the second wild card, and the worst division winner hosts the worst wildcard winner. The winner of the lowest division winner and lowest wildcard plays the top seed, which would pretty much certainly be the Orioles here. So we'll see how it shakes out. But absolutely, it's an important series. The Mariners have taken the previous 3-gamer that was at home, but hey, I think that there's reasons for optimism, and I think that this Mariners team is certainly capable of ripping off a nice hot streak that could be very useful. It's not a guarantee. I'm optimistic. I'm saying 3-1 because I feel like when you're able to line up Luis Castillo and George Kirby in a series, those aren't guaranteed wins by any means, but they're giving you some pretty good chances, and then you just need a coin flip to go your way for the last two. So that's where I'm at. I'm reasonably optimistic. You got anything to add, Andrew?
Nothing in particular. I am curious to see if Julio's going to maintain this pace through September, from pretty much being the best player in baseball for the last 2 weeks. So we'll see how long that lasts. I'm also curious to see. I can't believe I forgot this. My favorite player, Harry, on the Mariners. How is Matt Brash doing?
Matt Brash is a really interesting guy because he started out this year and he had a couple bad outings and a lot of bad luck on batted balls in play, but his peripheral numbers were insane. And slowly but surely, the baseball gods have done right by him. And he has gone from a guy who had kind of an unsightly ERA to one of the most reliable cogs in this Mariners bullpen. And, here's something funny. Just last night against the Reds, he got lucky. He gave up some hard contact, and for once, it ended up in someone's glove instead of being a hit. So, I think all's well that ends well. Matt Brash has been having an excellent year. He's still Matt Brash. Lots of strikeouts, lots of walks, lots of wild pitches. But when he's on, and especially when he has at least a base open to allow him to, put a guy on, even let that guy advance on a wild pitch, he's a really, really good reliever.
Good to hear. That's what I want to hear, because Matt Brash is one of my favorite players. He's got some of the nastiest stuff in the league. Throws incredibly hard. Is he throwing in the hundreds now? It's still like a 98.
He touches it. I mean, he's basically, I'd say he's 97, 98, and when he's amped, he's like 100.
Yeah, but he's got that crazy slider as well.
But Andrew, we do have one last section.
We do.
It has nothing to do with baseball, in fact.
Yeah, no. This will be a setup for next week probably, because next week, obviously this weekend, the weekend we're recording this. So we're recording this on Thursday, the 7th of September. But we have the NFL season starting here in like 2 hours. So Chiefs and Lions are going to be playing here on Thursday night. And the first week of the NFL season starts this Sunday. So we'll spend a quick amount of time talking about football right now. Just like 2 quick notes, and then we'll be out of here. And next week we'll probably talk a good bit more football. But wanted to talk baseball this week while we still could. So, and also baseball's not going away. Clearly playoffs are just about to start, but just want to get some quick stuff out of the way first. So, Nick Bosa just signed the most expensive contract for a defensive player of all time yesterday. He signed a 5-year, $170 million contract that I believe could be worth up to like a little over 200, if I read that correctly. But it's a 5-year, 170 mil per 170 mil total. And he's now the highest paid player on the defense in the NFL. So, well deserved for him. He's crucial to that Niners pass rush and what they do with stunts up there on that front. He's the guy who kind of makes it all work. Him, Eric Armstead, and they've got a couple of other pretty good guys there on the D-line as well. So, good stuff for that. And the Chiefs' Travis Kelce, who hyperextended his knee last, 2 or 3 days ago, so on Monday, more or less, I think is when it was.
Right.
He hyperextended his knee. Thankfully, he avoided any long-term serious injury, but he is out for tonight against the Lions. And to me, it makes it interesting that Chiefs wide receiver core that's just not that great. You got Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Sky Moore, a couple of riff-raff weapons that...
They still have Pringle, right?
No, I think Pringle's gone.
Come on, man. Best name in the league?
It's tragic, man. It's tragic, but I think Byron Pringle's gone. But yeah, that Chiefs wide receiver core, it's basically just a bunch of random tools that can be used in very specific ways that Andy Reid can scheme up pretty nicely to be effective. But in of themselves, they're not great. They're just okay receivers. The real crown jewel of that offense is Travis Kelce, who makes everything go. So the fact that he's going to be out, I think they'll still beat the Lions tonight. But it'll be interesting to see how Travis Kelce bounces back from that. He is getting up there in age. I think he's, 31, 32 years old? So we'll see how he bounces back from that. But I have faith that Patrick Mahomes will probably break through and be just fine. So we'll see how it goes. And I think that's about it for the NFL, unless you have something else to add, Harry.
Only that Sam Howell's going to win MVP, and the Commanders, who have been freed from the shackles of Dan Snyder's ownership, are going to go undefeated on their way to their 4th Super Bowl championship this year. I'm a Commanders fan. We're going to be talking about it. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, Andrew, especially because now I can actually root for my team wholeheartedly.
I know. It'll be strange when, the Dallas Cowboys come into town and curb stomp you again, as has been tradition.
Yeah, you mean like you did last year?
Did they win last year?
With Sam Howell, baby.
Oh, that's
Sam
right.
Howell's undefeated against the Cowboys.
Like the throwaway Week 18 game that nobody cares about?
Boo-hoo-hoo-hoo. They made Dak Prescott look like he was in the playoffs with the way he was throwing picks.
Listen, man. Listen, we'll talk about football next week.
We will.
But
it's going to be a lot of fun when we talk about how you think that Trey Lance is going to save the Dallas Cowboys, but...
Trey Lance is... To me, Trey Lance is the future. I will say that.
Did you see that? It was like a quarterback doctor or whatever. It was like a YouTube short or something.
Right.
And he was just showing this play where Trey Lance, they're running a curl, right? Tight end runs curl, middle of the field. There's literally a linebacker just standing right next to him. And the only reason he doesn't get picked off is because Trey Lance's throw is so bad.
Listen, man. Listen. After a year in the Texas Coast offense with Mike McFraud leading the helm,
offensive visionary,
Trey Lance is going to come out being elite. Just you watch.
Every time I hear someone say Trey Lance has all the tools to be a great quarterback, I think about how Jamarcus Russell could throw it 80 yards from his knees. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but Jamarcus Russell didn't have the work ethic. He was fat and lazy.
That story where they gave him film, but it was a blank disc. Did you watch? Yeah, I watched it.
Who was the teammate? Who was the teammate that gave that story? I forget who it was. That is a pretty legendary story, though. That's great.
But yes, so kind of brutal. Not gonna lie. I don't think Trey Lance is going to be any good, but we'll have plenty to talk about when Dak Prescott gets benched after the Cowboys lose their first game to the Commanders 73-0.
I just don't agree, but I think that's about it for the show, Harry. If you want to go ahead and take us out.
Sure. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Pocket Pushers podcast. It's definitely going to change a little bit as baseball kind of narrows into the postseason format and the NFL enters the picture. But we're really going to be here, me and Andrew, focusing on our teams and general league news. It's going to be a lot of fun. Hope you stick around. And again, thank you so much for your time.